Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. You have found us here at Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, who is here every Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET to bring you another wonderful author. And today we have such a treat for you. I cannot wait to introduce you to Margaret Pinard. And hang on for 1 second because everybody is gathering to celebrate Margaret and her pub day. As I said, I'm Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 14 novels of suspense. The newest one, Her Perfect Life, is out right now. And my upcoming book, The House Guest, will be out in February, and you will hear about it. But today, hooray, 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 we have the absolute joy of pulling back the curtain to reveal what's really going on at Crime Time every week. Margaret Pinard is here, and you may not think you know her, but you do know her. You don't see her every week, but she is here on Crime Time as the person behind the curtain who makes this all work as producer of Crime Time. She puts up the blurbs, she puts up the reviews, she puts up the links, she puts up the funny little comments in the chat. She makes sure you all have a marvelous time. Also, Margaret, she also listens to me, which is like the only person in the world who does. And if I say, oh, remember that book about the thing? In 1 second, she's got the book about the thing in the comments. It is almost a game now. I try not to make it too hard, but she's absolutely spectacular. So we are so honored today to have Margaret here on the pub day for her new book of short stories called Fabled Passages. It is unique. It is quirky. It is thought-provoking. You've never read anything like that, and I say it in the most affectionate and admiring kind of ways. I cannot wait to talk with Margaret about her voice. Let's talk to Margaret a little bit, and then I'll tell you about Mighty Blaze, and then I'll give you Margaret's bio. But Anissa is here to wish happy pub day, and Sherry's here to wish happy pub day. Person is here, and Renee and Pamela. Oh my golly, Sherry, thank you. Everyone is here applauding Margaret Pinard. Let me just say one more time, show you. This is a group of short stories. An anthology is the word I'm looking for, so unsuccessfully, called Fabled Passages. Speculative stories, it's called. What does that mean, speculative stories, Margaret?
Oh, a leading question. Why, thank you. Hi, everybody. So I put speculative stories in there so that people would have an extra clue as to what they would find inside. When I was looking at the genre categorizations where I could somehow shoehorn all of these stories into one label, I came up with speculative fiction, which is a broader category than I was used to envisioning, but it contains fantasy, science fiction, supernatural, horror, sort of all these things that are not of this world, and it just gives you a lot of creative license. And so I thought, yes, all of the stories fit under that banner. So I thought I'd stick that in there to be a little help to people deciding what it's about. Yeah.
And it does work because speculative fiction to me too, and you do this so gorgeously in this book. It's sort of things that could happen. I mean, how do we know that it couldn't happen? And well, we'll talk a little bit more. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Do you say that you love historical fiction? Do you remember the first book or story of historical fiction that sort of lured you in and hooked you into thinking about that?
Dear goodness, yes. I think I was in 5th grade, and it was Johnny Tremaine.
Johnny Tremaine?
Yes.
Are you kidding? The young hero of the Revolutionary War. Yes. Did you read the book, the little blue book, the bio, or was it the book that was?
It was a fiction book, and now I'm going to forget. It's like a classic. I think it was Anne.
Well, we'll find it.
On it. There we go. Someone else help me here. But it was historical fiction for kids, and it was like he's the apprentice of the silversmith who runs off, and he hates his fellow apprentice, and there's pranks, and then he, becomes the hero of the moment. And I was like, That could happen. That could have been how it was.
That could happen. I'm looking at the comments when I'm looking over here, you all. I'm looking at the comments, and Janine Woodworth says, one of my favorite stories, Johnny Tremaine. And then there was a big Disney movie about it as well.
Oh, live action?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this was Margaret. This was like, I think the 60s or something. So I think
they had cartoons then, though.
Yeah,
this is not. This was yeah,
I think it might have even been on the Wonderful World of Disney. Well, we can talk about it. We can find out about it. So Johnny Tremaine was your entryway. Do you remember what you liked about that? How that made your brain work as a little kid?
Interesting. I liked that it had elements of history that I could learn about and imagine myself in a different time. Because I think middle school, junior high is always a trying time for people in one way or another. And, someone who wasn't the, cleanest of heroes, he had faults and quirks and whatnot, but he ended up doing the right thing. And that's a hopeful message. So that's what I grew up with. Definitely.
He was also clever. He had to make do with what he had and use his brain and use his intelligence and his wits. And it made you I think it makes us realize at that age that a young person has some power and has some agency and can make a difference in the world.
Right. Even if it's just a tiny bit, that tiny bit could change the course of history. You never know.
Exactly. And Mary Garrett is saying she used to teach that book in her history class. And Beth Ann, welcome Beth Ann, is saying, good old Johnny Tremaine. I remember reading that in elementary school too. Welcome Beth Ann. We're glad you're here today to celebrate the fabulous Margaret Pinard, who spends a lot of her time here at Crime Time behind the scenes. And today we have dragged her out into the front row so you can meet her all and celebrate this wonderful collection of short stories that publishes today. Hooray, hooray, hooray. Let me just say quickly, Margaret has been with A Mighty Blaze almost since the very beginning, joining like the second month, I think, of A Mighty Blaze, and has been such a stalwart producer and creator, and has worked so hard behind the scenes most of the time. If you're new to A Mighty Blaze, you should know that it was started 2.5 years ago by the fabulous powerhouse team of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt, who brought us all together to keep us talking about books and learning about books and discovering new books and seeing who the powers are behind the curtain. Just Eva is saying, love dragging Margaret out into...
Eva sees enough of me already. She's like, what?
Isn't that great? And I love how happy you look, Margaret. Congratulations on this. I know you've been all over social media about this book. Everybody is talking about these speculative fiction short stories, and we will talk about that in a minute. And Mark is here. Hey, Thoughtful Bro is saying, go, Margaret, go. Let me tell you a little bit about Margaret's background. And I'm reading this the way she wrote it. So you have to hear Margaret's voice saying it, because it's going to be so much better than my voice saying it. And Laura Rossi is here. Look, everybody is here. That is great. You're good. You Mighty Blazers. You are good pals. Her bio says, Margaret is a soul from the 19th century who finds it easiest to disguise herself by drinking tea. See, she's doing that now. Writing historical fiction and popping off to the British Isles for research. She has published 5 novels, including the Remnants trilogy, exploring immigrant stories in the 19th century, Scotland and Canada, and 1 short story collection. Margaret co-founded Jólabókaflóð PDX, an Icelandic-themed indie book festival, and has been a booktuber, author-tuber, and blazer since 2020. She grew up in the happiest place on earth, according to Oprah. Is that like Gucci or Disney World?
Someone will remember this from a TV special like 10 years ago. I just wanted to put that in for fun.
Oh, so what is it?
San Luis Obispo, California.
Oh, okay. So not Rodeo Drive and not...
No. It was like featured on her show and stuff. Okay. We got a little blip of fame. Okay. Yeah.
But she manages, the bio says, to be fairly happy in Portland, Oregon, with her cat Bean doubling as her publicist. So Bean has done a great job, and we are so happy that you are here today. We are talking about Fabled Passages by Margaret Pinard, a series of short stories that publishes today. And Margaret is giving away a copy of these stories to enter to win, all you have to do is leave a comment in the comments. I mean, where else would you leave the comment?
In the chat. Yep.
In the comments. Renee Herskowitz is saying Orlando for the luckiest place, and also asking what type of tea are you drinking?
Oh, Renee, I just went with I have a treat actually, Yorkshire Gold. I went up a notch for this week. Yorkshire Gold black tea.
And you know, Mark, you're having a very exotic drink day, because I was asking Margaret what she was doing to celebrate her pub day, and tell everyone what you told me.
Yes. So Sherry was asking earlier, how did I celebrate the new book? And today, actually, I went to a place that has a seasonal drink called a hot buttered yam. And it's like if you could imagine a mix between a chai latte and a butter beer, which is fictional, but that is the energy it's going for. It's like sweet potato pie with sparkling sugar, with frothy milk. And it's like, yes, I needed to drive across the river to get it. And I was like, this is my launch day treat. So I was very happy to start off the day like that.
It does have sort of an essence of Renaissance fair kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, it does feel sort of historical. You say in your author's note, and when you get this book, you all, and this group of short stories, you all, and I hope you will, because it is quite unusually, wonderfully fabulous. You say in the author's note, which is equally good, that your writing has evolved during the pandemic, Margaret. And I wonder if I hear you totally about that. And I wonder if the idea of speculative fiction grew from that, because every day in the pandemic, we had no idea what was going to happen, and anything could happen. And I felt very out of time. Half the time I didn't know what day it was. Did that have anything to do with it?
Yeah. So as many writers may have experienced, the period of uncertainty and not knowing what was safe and what was safe for you, what was safe for other people, led to a lot of decisions that were very limited, and you felt sort of confined. If you were trying to be safe, I should say, and mask and quarantine and all those things. And so that isolation, that quarantining leads to, feelings of isolation and grappling with things that you maybe hadn't thought about in a while. So when I was going through that, I was going through several other transitions as well. I just left a job with a bookstore that closed, and relationships came and went in the pandemic. And to be confined to a small space and sort of feel that limit of safety sort of close in, and then try to write was hard. And so what I sort of evolved into, I've done historical fantasy before. I have a young adult novel where a girl's in high school and she starts seeing visions, and there's time travel involved where she has to fix something in the past. But what's different about the point of view of these stories is that it's basically characters who are presented with a different point of view on their own lives. It's not fixing something else. It's not, Johnny Tremaine changing history. It's looking at their own lives and thinking, did I do the right thing? Is there time for change? Who do I want to be? Because I think the pandemic moment was a really big opportunity for a lot of people to say, wow, there is a limited amount of time. There is a lot riding on the small decisions we're making. Maybe I need to pay more attention to those. So that's, stop the train. I need to get off and think for a minute. That's sort of where it started and what it blossomed from.
And that's one of the wonderful sort of time release, if I could use the word, time release things about these stories. Each one starts out in a way that you think it's going to be, and then it sort of blossoms and evolves into being something else. And they're quirky and funny, and each one is incredibly different from the other, but they each reveal a person on a journey with a theme and a result. Is that how you see the structure of a short story?
Structure. Oh, my.
I know.
Yeah. So coming at things from the opposite opposite direction of a master mystery writer who can plot and figure things out going backwards.
I'm gonna do this, you all. Let me just. Of course, they're calling through. They're calling to say, "What time is Margaret's interview?" Like it's now. Anyway, we're talking about structure-ish.
Yes. So for normal historical fiction, what I would say is that I have several events in mind, and I try to weave them together with a personal story that interacts with those events. But for things that are so short, you sort of have a moment to play with rather than an arc. And your point has to be much more, I guess, punchier when you make it. So the structure of the short stories is a very small run-up, a very short setup, and being introduced to someone's mood, to someone's vibe, and then like either taking something away or presenting them with the problem. And what are they going to do? And that's all I see as the structure. That's why
I mean, I hear you completely. And I can, as you're describing that, I envision each of the stories like that. And I'm wondering, do you have the result? Do you know what the result of the story is going to be when you start? No.
I am a discovery writer. Yeah. So a lot of these were started with an idea, whether it was a dream, whether it was something I thought of walking down the street and I had to put it into my phone with voice, or a prompt. One of them was part of a flash fiction party that happens almost every Saturday on YouTube. So that is just another way to sort of get creative juices flowing. And that's part of the AuthorTube community's mission. So I'm part of that community. And that was one of the fun stories that made it in, was from flash fiction on Saturdays.
Which one was that?
The photograph. The prompt was the moment before the photograph is taken, something like that. And so I backed it up, and then I backed it up again, and then I ran right through it. That's my idea of structure. It's, as Eva was saying, structure, never heard of her.
I was just going to say that. That's great. Structure, never heard of her. Love that. Love that so much. But, it's interesting because you have the stories also have some connection in that there's a lost love sometimes, something that's missing. They're tender and poignant, and I loved the one about the 1784 woman coming back. Talk a little bit about that story and how that evolved.
The 1784 woman. Okay, so there's two possible stories you could mean. There's the cursed sibling.
There's Ward. I'm talking about Ward. Ward, who meets the woman, and he has a hybrid car on the highway.
Oh, okay. Devon, yes. So this is the southwest coast of England that inspired that. And I thought, what am I going to set on the southwest coast of England? And that was setting driven, believe it or not. I'm a big setting person. And so I've missed the question. Was the point
about Devon? I mean, there's this lost love.
Lost love.
And how did you decide? I mean, it's about love and sacrifice and people who haven't found what they want in their time, and how time can bring people together. And it's also about the wisdom of women, and about communication is what I saw from that.
Right. So what I put in the character who time travels in that story was a piece of someone who wants something very badly and wishes for it, and then gets a way to accomplish that goal, but scorns it, doesn't accept it, doesn't think that that's what she wants at all. And, has to kind of learn herself anew in order to appreciate this wish she's been given. And I hope that wasn't a spoiler, but
Well, it's not a spoiler at all. It's not a spoiler at all. But I love it is a funny, not funny, but it is a quirky, touching love story. It is thought provoking, both from everyone's point of view. Everyone's point of view changes during this story. Just one of the examples from Fabled Passages, Margaret Pinard's new anthology of short stories that is just publishing today. You have such a voice, Margaret. you're so risky, and your stories are so no holds barred. I mean, and even though the stories are so different, I can tell each one of them is you. You can hear that, you can feel that your voice is wry and knowing and smart and funny and full of research, all woven together. I loved your author's note where you said you tell readers even to throw out the rules, experiment, and take nothing for granted. And that is just how you write. Who are you when you write? You're sitting in your office. So you were saying you were dictating on your phone. Do you talk a little bit about that part of you?
Yes. So when I am writing, I don't dictate on my phone while I'm walking. That's just when I'm trying to catch the idea before it floats away. Yes. But normally, and this is the plug for YouTube. So since I am the interviewee, Karen is behind the scenes today. So Karen can put the plug in for YouTube. We do things on YouTube that are called sprints, where you're actually working while someone is watching you. And so if you want to see what I look like when writing and I'm not self-conscious about it, you can actually tune in. But yes, so I'm typically sat in either one of 3 chairs and on a laptop. Every once in a while, I'll be writing in a notebook. And
have you ever watched yourself? Have you ever do they tape it? Have you watched yourself?
Oh yeah, it's all recorded. I made the mistake of watching myself to put in chapters in a video, and I looked and I saw what I was doing sometimes when I'm looking close at the screen, and I did that, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. You don't even realize you're doing it. You're just in your natural space. But yeah, so yeah, listening to music often, sort of non-word music that will get me in the flow. And usually like an hour and 20 minutes is my like sweet spot. And then I have to go and do something else, like wash some dishes or make some food or go on a walk. Like I constantly have an expiration time for how long I can focus on something. And then I need to switch and like turn the gears to something else to keep it fresh. So
you talk about being in the flow. Writers talk about that, and you know it when you're in it. What does that feel like to you? And when you recognize it, do you sort of try to not recognize it because it'll go away?
Exactly. I don't know if anyone else is a fan of Billy Elliot, but that movie has a scene where someone asks him how it feels like when he's dancing, and it's part of the soundtrack. And he's trying to like, he's this 11, 12-year-old boy trying to process what it feels like when he's ballad dancing, as they say in Northern Ireland or Northern England. I don't remember where the accent was from, but he says, you don't feel yourself anymore. It's like your electricity. And sort of you're subsumed into something that is natural and everywhere at once and not conscious of itself. And yeah, you only know about it when it's over and you're like, oh.
When you're typing really, really fast and you're not even thinking about it.
Right.
There have been times when I've come to the computer the day after and I look at what I've written and I think, I wrote that. I just don't remember writing that. And then I'm happy.
Yeah. It's magic. It just came out.
Yes. And I think any writer understands that. It's really quite amazing, but you can't make it happen. And that's the thing. Did you decide, and again, we're talking about Fabled Passages, Margaret Pinard's brand new series of speculative fiction, historical, a lot of them. Did you plan to make it be an anthology, a collection like this, or did you write a story and then write another story and then think, oh, I could put these together?
Well, like many writers, I have lots of scraps of paper around. And the form of some of those scraps of paper is Google Docs. And so every once in a while, I will make a half-hearted attempt to streamline things and delete files because my thing is becoming full, my drive, whatever. Yeah. And so I would go back and I realized that I had all these little scraps of paper virtually that were short stories, that were prompts, that were ideas that hadn't been developed. And so I started sort of shuffling them to the front of the pack and like looking them over and going, no, that's never going to work. And then thinking maybe maybe I can develop these into short stories and put them all together, instead of submitting, because the whole request and query and that whole journey is just too much for me. So
well, I do think, though, that your stories are very powerful together, because each of them has a character who we really care about. Sometimes it's a dog or a spider from their point of view, a
yes.
character who we really care about, and we get in their brain, as you said initially. And then there's a personal element to each story, but there's also a universal element to each story. It's not just the story of that person or spider. It teaches us, almost fables somehow. Almost, again, it reminds me of Philip Pullman somehow, that is there magic or isn't there magic, or what is that? And maybe we just don't know. Do you consciously go for the small picture and the bigger picture?
Not consciously. So, what's funny is we have the two people in the chat who helped me wrestle with the title and what I came up with the title. So Eva and JD are both here. And thank you guys. They were trying to pinpoint what brought the stories together, and the feeling of them being a fable, not in the sense that there's a moral and this is how you should live your life, but they're cultural touchstones of something that is important to us, that says something about our values, and you can evaluate it and agree with it, or evaluate it and like decide that, well, this has changed, or this is not so much my brand. And the passages part is because they're all people on a journey, and I thought I wanted it to be discovering and that sort of
thing. I will confess to you in front of all of your friends, JD is saying, hi JD, anytime we can keep surprising ourselves with what we wrote, it's fantastic. And I have to admit to you in front of all of these people, is that I never thought about fabled passages like fables when I read the title. So I don't know whether it just sunk into my brain somehow, or whether it's just so purely true that's what a fable is. Also, that and I'm trying to think that this won't really give anything away. From time to time, just like life, the reader can figure out what happens without having it beaten into them or given to them. Possible outcomes are offered to them, which makes them, the stories, so provocative and thought-provoking, if that's not the same word. I remember when I was growing up, when I was 10, it is the same word, right? I remember reading Lady or the Tiger. Remember that when you were like in junior high? And just go look. You all have read Lady or the Tiger, right? The Lady or the Tiger. And it's the essential, the author figures out the ending kind of story. I bet I read it when I was 10. And our English classes would discuss endlessly, oh no, it was this, oh no, it was this. And everybody was passionate about that. And that's a good
debatable
story. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's debatable. That's debatable. A great gift. Yeah.
Yes. And your story that ends with a window is, again, and I won't tell which one it is again debatable, and really
that reveals nothing. And that was also Barrett's favorite. So yeah.
It's what?
The friend who I talked with yesterday on his channel, Barrett Laurie, it was his favorite. So he wanted to ask me about that one because of its very debatable nature and like provocative. Yeah, yeah.
And so what did he say about your stories?
He was very interested in the fact that what appears to be a brother and sister who are cursed for all eternity, and exiled in places / settings unknown, we'll just say that, maybe had a hand in their own destiny, or maybe it's an allegory for something completely different, or maybe it's much more introspective than it seems. And so it's a short fantasy tale, but it's also very revealing based on what you think the last scene is worth. So that window into another life it's just one of those moments that I love to hear people talk about their own experiences for, because I had one, but everyone's going to have a different like ending taste. It's like a wine. I hear,
Mhm.
I'm not a wine drinker, but I hear there's all these tastes, and the very last one on a wine is kind of like what that moment leaves you with. And so it's very gratifying for me to hear people's different takes on it. Yeah.
Because again, it's what is real, and what, you say do we have control of our lives or not? And do we really know what our lives are and what they're composed of and who's in charge and who's in control of anyone? As a matter of fact, I have here a little part of that story. And I'll just read a tiny little bit. And this is a little bit of the story, won't give away anything, and also tells you Margaret's voice so beautifully. And it was, in fact, 1839, but not her 1839. She distinctly remembered her own 1839, and there were no shining strings holding bobbing conveyances in the air. She was her own age, that is to say, the age she would have been in 1839, and had the god's curse never been enacted. She wanted to test out whether that also meant she was no longer immortal, but feared the dying if the answer was yes. I mean, that's hilarious. It's thoughtful. I mean, it is hilarious. It's thoughtful. It's so meta. It's explaining how you write. It's explaining how you're looking at the world. It's saying to the reader, I don't know, what do you think? Was it fun to write that?
Yes. It was also, I'm sure when I was writing it and I was in that zone of it's flowing, it was more bewildering, because I think as a discovery writer, when you're writing, you don't know what the ending is until the very end. And so that was just my brain like taking a pause and being like, you don't know what's coming.
And it's funny too, because I can see that in my writing sometimes too. I'll see, here's me thinking about this.
Right.
I'm putting it on the page, but it's really my brain
Right.
trying to deconstruct and reconstruct what's going to happen. But I just think you did it. So it's so much fun to read. We're talking about Fabled Passages. We have about 5 more minutes, you all, and I do want to take questions, but I want to remind you that Margaret is giving away a copy of Fabled Passages to one lucky commenter. So leave a comment or a question or just general accolades and admiration. You have and you will be entered to win. You have the point of view of a spider, which is just so fun and funny, and the point of view of a very sweet dog. What was it, talk about fun. Was it fun for you to write those, or did you think, I wonder what that dog is really thinking?
So those are like the two end posts of the writing. The spider one was actually drafted in 2015. That was one of my Google Docs, the oldest ones. And the dog one was this summer, when I was trying to beef up the story and figure out what would continue the same vibe that I'd sort of amassed. And at that point, I was spending time, as I do, split between Portland and San Luis Obispo, back where I grew up in my hometown, and walked around my old schools and my old high school. And so I remember walking by the elementary school and just being like, there's a creek there? What? How did I not know there is a creek like the block behind? You don't know things when you're a kid, right?
Yeah.
But you look at the neighborhood differently, and you just like wonder about the lives of people. Normally we do this as adults as well, but having such a different experience of a landscape you thought you knew so well, because I walked to school every day.
Yeah.
That was just very suggestive to me. So I looked at this pretty little house with all the plants and like the big barrier, because I'm sure they didn't enjoy all the children making noise right across the street.
Yeah.
And thought, wow, that's I wonder if that's related, and let's take my experience and filter that through this possibility. And so that's just how it got mixed up. And the spiders, I don't know. It had been too long, so I don't know what inspired that one. I hope it wasn't a dream or a nightmare.
My husband and I had a big conversation about spiders, so I loved that you did the story, because these orb spiders that spin those gorgeous huge webs, and they sparkle in the sunlight when you see them in the morning. And sometimes I think we have a guard spider in front of our house, because so many mornings there's a big web right in front of our front steps, so that we cannot get down the steps without breaking the web. And I just use another door. I mean, I just won't break it, because I think, oh, she worked so hard to do that. Who am I to break it? And my husband says, they'll just make another one.
Yeah.
And I think, well, why should they do that? So I don't know. So the spider story really spoke to me a little bit, and I love the fantasy names. Have you always wanted to be a writer? I mean, ever since Johnny Tremaine?
Yes, I've wanted to be a lot of things, right? And I didn't ever want to choose. I don't know if I wanted to be them in succession and be orderly about it, or just wanted to do all the things all the time. But
Like
I think
what?
growing up, it was a musical theater actress, and in college, it was, I don't know, an activist lawyer, some sort of like, bringing power to the people kind of person. So there have been a variety of dreams, and they're all sort of making themselves known and coming out through the fiction because I guess the first time I started writing fiction for myself that I can remember is in high school. And again, like one of those times when you're challenged, you're becoming an adult, you're questioning assumptions. I grew up Catholic, so there was that being tossed in the mix. I am no longer Catholic. So there are a lot of sort of things being chosen and given up. And I started writing, very, very adolescent stories, love stories, things like that. And put it aside for political, international affairs kind of stuff in college and grad school. And then when that sort of didn't produce the effect or the satisfaction that I wanted, I was like, well, what can I go back to at my root that makes me feel like I am fulfilling my potential, that I am bringing to life the things that are inside me. And so that's when I came back to writing and started with historical fiction.
Well, you're making me cry actually here, because the idea of even realizing that you want to live up to your potential, that's something that a lot of people never even get to. And we should talk someday. I had the same trajectory. I definitely was going to be in musical theater. I wanted to be Adelaide in Guys and Dolls. I mean, yeah, Adelaide in Guys and Dolls, totally. And I wanted to be in, I Love You, Bushel and a Peck. What's that? Who's that? In
Adelaide.
Yeah.
C note. C note. No, I love her song.
Sing this together. Any Rosalind Russell part also. I always thought I'd be perfect for the Rosalind Russell part.
She's great.
I wonder about that. That performing is being someone else, is putting yourself in someone else's skin, is speaking like someone else, is being in their story. Do you think that's connected to writing?
That's a fascinating question. And I think about this, especially because Jenna Payon, I used to produce for Jenna for her show, and she is a musical writer and singer, and now is writing. And so she's answered questions like that in the past that really made me think. And for me right now, I think writing is not performative in the same way that I was performing as a young person in theater. And if I was to try to do that now, I think I would find it very difficult, because sliding into a different identity after I've spent so much time struggling to cut away what isn't right in mine and fashion it in a strong way to make sure it's like durable. When I've spent so much time on this one, now I'm kind of like, but how do I give that up? And what does that mean? And it would be a very strange thing now. But one of the stories in the collection is actually inspired by a high school theater experience. So yeah, that's a relevant question. It's my favorite one in there. It's no one else's favorite. So
which is it, Margaret?
It's called Sometime a Paradox. And I don't know.
No, okay, we just won't talk. No, but everybody, we're talking about Fabled Passages, Margaret Pinard's new collection. I'll get the light out of there. New collection of speculative fiction short stories. And we will search for Margaret's favorite story, and you will certainly find your favorite story in this book. Margaret, quickly before we take a couple of questions, tell us where to find you. You're everywhere on the internet, and I don't want people to miss the chance to hear more from you.
Yeah, so my main platform is YouTube. Since the pandemic started, I've had my own channel. It's just called Margaret Pinard, so it's pretty easy. And I am on there 2 to 3 times a week doing book reviews and writing sprints. So you can write along with me if you would like, as well as readathons and just like fun things in the book community on YouTube. So that is mainly where it can be found. I've also got a website, margaretpinard.com, where you can buy books, where you can read thoughts. And I'm on Instagram at Margaret Pinard and Twitter at Taste Life Twice. And Twitter is the second most favorite. I know a lot of people complain about Twitter, but I find lovely people on there. So I don't know. I value, invalidate, and validate. Sorry, I didn't mean to sound like invalidate other people's experiences on Twitter, but that has not been my experience. So
I agree. I think it's just who you find, one of those
Yeah.
things, and who you decide not to connect with or not. But there are lots of really wonderful people on Twitter. Absolutely so.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about, I mean, you started a Mighty Blaze 2 months in. How has that experience been? No pressure, nobody from.
Yes, here on A Mighty Blaze. Well, I mean, there is no other way I could have connected with so many wonderful authors and learned so much about publishing behind the scenes and learned about so many new people who are guests on your show or on other people's shows. Recently, I started going back into my favorite interviews and just like tweeting them out and putting little points about how I found this book through A Mighty Blaze, and it's amazing. And yeah, just to appreciate people's, free work. And so that's the outside part, but the inside part where we have, our little visits and we have our little jokes on email chains, and it's just a virtual community. It's been fantastic. So yeah, been a dream.
I absolutely agree. It's a gorgeous organization that does so much good. And when I go like this, I'm looking at the comments, look at all the people who are here. And it is, it's great. It's great. The pandemic is horrible, but this wouldn't have happened without that. And is one of the blessings that we can take from a time of terribleness, as is Fabled Passages. Such a lovely, thought-provoking collection of speculative fiction short stories that you do not want to miss. Let's take a couple of questions if you have time, Margaret, on your big launch day to take a couple of questions. Oh, Darlene, what a good question. How do you know when you have the right number of short stories for a complete book? How many is that? How many pages? How would you figure it out? Is it quantifiable? Is it a rhythm?
Excellent question. I didn't know. I tried to Google it. I was like, okay, I have a heap here. Now, what does this mean? I think that normally they would be longer for a single author. I have another friend, Leah Engstman, who has written a single author collection of short stories that are historical. Niche. She's coming on my channel on Friday along with EDK because we're going to talk historical short stories. And hers is like 2.5 times as long as mine. Mm-hmm. And I thought about it and I thought, well, I could write a few more. I could replace them. And I was sort of juggling back and forth between different possibilities. And I thought, I really want to publish something this year. It feels like this is where I start to like move forward again after pandemic immobility. Uh-huh. And so I settled on a shorter collection because they all hang together in some way. They had a theme. I felt good about them. And it's only 25,000 words. And I was like, I'm okay with that. This is a novella length collection of short stories. I think people can handle that. I'm going to trust the audience to say, hey, this is a nice bite-sized spooky read for the season, and not stress myself out about, but it has to be XYZ because the industry standard is.
Oh my golly. I, as Eva was saying, the industry standard, who is that? I don't know. We don't know.
Right. I don't know her. Yeah. So
and I think your book is really, to Darlene's question, really fun to read. It's exactly the right length. It's many short stories. It's not a short book. It's many wonderful short stories. So you can read them all at once very happily. We're talking about Fabled Passages. You can read them all in one sitting very happily. You can dip in. You could open the book at any page and come up with a wonderful adventure and a wonderful moment.
And they're varying lengths, right? So the shortest is about 700 words and the longest is, I think, 6,700. So it was, as I said, very experimental. It was playing with expectations and form. So it was very fun.
Playing with expectations and form is a brilliant way of putting it, because you have no idea what you're getting when you go in. And then when you finish the first one and the second one is so different and you think, what? I mean, completely different. And then you begin to realize every one of these is going to be special, and every one of these is going to be a treat, and every one of them is going to be unexpected and lovely. And that is Fabled Passages by Margaret Pinard. Let me take 2 more questions. Do we have 2 more questions? I know we're really, really, really running out of time. Do you need to read your books in order? Tell me about the keening.
Oh, thank you, Janine. Okay, so the other books, the 5 books, Memories Hostage, historical mystery, my first though, so be kind. It's yes. Dulce's Legacy is the young adult time travel that I mentioned earlier. And then my 3rd, 4th, and 5th books are the ones that are in a series. And I would suggest that you read them in order. The Keening is the first, but they basically take a different generation of a family that has started in Scotland, been kicked off their lands because of political turmoil, and ends up emigrating to Canada. And their struggles based on religion, based on prejudice, based on sort of class differences and expectations. So yeah, that was what I was exploring with those.
So best in order, since it is a chronological.
Yeah.
Okay, terrific. Who has one more question or one more comment? What are you reading for pleasure? It's hard to do that, isn't it, when you're writing? Or you're a big historical fiction fan?
Yes. So I'm also a booktuber, and so we have like homework because we give that to ourselves. And so October pleasure reading is basically 2 things. There's something called Victober, which is Victorian novels and nonfiction. And I'm reading a book about the MacDonald sisters for that. The wives and daughters of some very famous men who are also very interesting on their own. And then Black Aweenathon, which is crime writers of color. And so I've been reading Nikesa Afia's first, and I'm going to try to read her 2nd book before the end of the month, as well as my friend Elle Penelope's historical fantasy mystery, because I love the genre mashup. So that's yes. And so she's on my list as well. So yeah.
Tell us about BookTube.
BookTube. It's a group of people who like to read books. They self-select by genre and style and, viewing preferences. There's lots and lots of small channels because it's a lot of book nerds. There are also a few huge channels with like 1 million subscribers, and they have the higher production value. But we're okay with being sort of bumbling amateurs here on the other end. And yeah, I've just found loads of friends who love to read great books and hear about other people's recommendations to expand what they're reading. Because I think if we only read what we have read, we never learn more about the world. And so if you're someone who is quarantining, how do you learn about the world? You listen to other people's recommendations and then give it a try.
And that's why we're here, totally bumbling amateurs that we are. We embrace being bumbling amateurs. Let's give away a copy. And I want you, when this is over, Margaret, not to forget to look at the comments, because there is so much admiration and so much affection and so much love for you in the comments. And I know it's hard to look at the comments when you're thinking about questions, thinking about answering.
I forgot how hard it is on a Blaze show.
And we will now draw for the winner of Fabled Passages. Let's see who won.
Everyone is being marvelous. Thank you, guys.
Sherry Brown, wonderful. Sherry is a wonderful, longtime Crime Time listener. And Sherry, you lucky, lucky woman. I know you will love Fabled Passages. And the rest of you, in about 30 seconds, run right out and get your own copy of this marvelous collection of life-changing, truly short stories. Margaret, are you doing anything special tonight to celebrate?
Tonight. I have my own live stream on my YouTube channel where I'm going to be doing some more giveaways. So I did a little pre-order campaign. And so I've got, let's see, a BookTube sweater and a consultation and some Patreon benefits, just some random writerly things that I thought would appeal to people. So we're going to do some more giveaways on my channel at 4:20 And I'm in Pacific, so 4:20 Pacific time.
And tell us where to find that on your YouTube channel, Margaret Pinard.
Yes, Margaret Pinard on YouTube.
I hope everyone will join you then. And I also hope, before we go, I hope you will join us again on next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET. Look who we have on Crime Time. B.A. Paris, who I think is in France right now, with her new book, The Prisoner. Look at that cover. And she is marvelous. She wrote Behind Closed Doors. You've all read that, of course. Any crime fiction fan has read Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. And she is marvelous and she is great. And this is a brand new book. And she will join us from the EU next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET. Goodness knows what time it is where she is, but she has promised to be here. So again, Margaret, thank you for coming out from behind the scenes. We cannot do this without you. You know that. You are such a treasure and so wise. And I enjoy working with you every week. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Hank. This is incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your audience. And I'm happy to meet all of you in person-ish.
Some days, in a person-ish.
Yes.
Look for Fabled Passages anywhere that you buy ebooks. And meanwhile, we will see you next week right here on Crime Time. Thank you so much for coming. Happy Pub Day, Margaret.
Thank you.